My name is Sarah, and I've spent the last 47 years of my life building walls. Walls to protect myself, to keep me from feeling too vulnerable or too exposed. After a painful divorce a few years ago, I convinced myself that I didn't need anyone. I was fine on my own. Life became manageable, predictable, and honestly, easier. It felt safer to keep my distance from people than to risk being hurt again. But life has a funny way of forcing us to face the very things we try so hard to avoid. I had known Charles for about 2 years before anything between us began to shift. He was a friend of a friend, someone I'd met at a gathering. He wasn't the type of man I usually found myself drawn to. He was calm, thoughtful, and most importantly, patient. We clicked instantly as friends, and for a long time, that's all it was. Just friendship. But something began to change. His easy smile, the way he always made a point to ask how I was really doing, his gentle humor, things I didn't realize I needed suddenly became things I craved. There was something about him, an unspoken confidence that made you feel seen, heard, and important. At first, our conversations were light, friendly banter about work, favorite books, and the random little things that make life interesting. But slowly, those conversations deepened. We began sharing stories from our pasts, our fears, and the quiet hopes we carried. Charles had this rare ability to truly listen, without interrupting, without judgment. When he did speak, his words carried this calm understanding that made my own burdens feel lighter, somehow more manageable. One evening, after a particularly exhausting week, Charles messaged me. He asked if I wanted to grab a drink. Nothing fancy, just a chance to unwind. I hadn't realized how much I missed his presence until that very moment. There was something about being around him that felt peaceful, familiar, and, if I was honest with myself, exciting. We met at a cozy little bar downtown. The chemistry between us was undeniable, but we both pretended it was still just friendly. Or, at least, I tried to convince myself it was. As the evening went on, we found ourselves sitting closer than we ever had before. Our conversation drifted away from the surface-level chatter and dove into deeper waters. He asked about my divorce, how I had coped, what it had taught me. I had never shared those thoughts with anyone, not like this. But with Charles it felt safe. He listened with compassion, never judging, only asking the kinds of questions that helped me navigate emotions I'd buried for years. It was refreshing, healing. But beneath that comfort was something else stirring, something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Over the following weeks, we continued to meet. Sometimes over coffee, sometimes a glass of wine. Each conversation pulled us closer. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore the growing attraction between us. I started to feel things I hadn't felt in years, longing, excitement, and an unexpected sense of connection. But with that connection came fear. He was my friend, someone I trusted. I didn't know if I was ready to let my guard down again. I was scared of what might happen if I opened my heart, and maybe even more scared of what would happen if I didn't. Then one day, Charles invited me over to his place to help him with a small project. I agreed, expecting another casual hangout. But the moment I walked in, something felt different. The lighting was soft, the air felt calm, intimate. We worked for a while, but as the evening wore on, we eventually found ourselves sitting together on his couch, closer than ever before. Our legs brushed, and the silence between us was thick with things neither of us had yet dared to say. Then he turned to me, his eyes locking with mine. And for a moment, the world faded. He told me he'd been thinking about me, not just as a friend, but as something more. His voice was gentle, but his words struck me like lightning. I wasn't expecting it. Or maybe I had been. Maybe I just hadn't let myself admit it. In that instant, I realized I'd been feeling the same pull, the same desire to cross that invisible line we'd both tiptoed around for so long. My heart raced. I wanted to tell him how I felt, but fear clung to me. What if I was wrong? What if I was misreading everything? But then he was still there, still looking at me, his gaze filled with warmth, sincerity, And something deeper, something real, waiting, hoping. Without thinking, I leaned in. The kiss started soft, hesitant, as if we were both testing the waters. But it deepened quickly, filled with years of unspoken words, suppressed emotions, and something electric that neither of us could deny. In that kiss, the walls I had spent decades building began to crumble. The next few days were a whirlwind. I felt guilty, confused, unsure of what to do next. I'd been on my own for so long. Was I really ready for this? Could I trust myself again? Could I trust someone else with my heart? But Charles was patient. He never pushed, never rushed. He made it clear that he cared, that he wanted to see where this could go, but only when I was ready. He let things unfold naturally. And as the weeks passed, I found myself drawn closer to him. Our relationship shifted. No longer just friends, but something more, something deeper. We laughed together, shared our deepest fears, and celebrated the little joys of life. It wasn't just about attraction. It was about the connection, the understanding, the trust we had built over time, the feeling of being truly seen, truly heard. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't the big moments that changed everything. It was the small ones, the quiet conversations, the simple acts of kindness, the way he made me feel safe without asking me to be anything other than myself. Today, when I look at Charles, I still feel that same excitement, the butterflies. But alongside that, there's a deep, steady peace, a sense of home. For the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to open my heart. The fear of getting hurt is still there. It probably always will be. But it's no longer stronger than my desire to take a chance on love and on a future I never thought I'd be brave enough to hope for.